Walla Valley is a health and well-being improvement initiative based in the Walla Walla Valley in Washington. So we cover Walla Walla and College Place. And the work that we do is based on research done by National Geographic fellow Dan Buettner. He researched with a team the longevity hotspots around the world. And these were the 5 original blue zones. These are places where people lived to age 100 or greater at higher rates than anywhere else in the world. So he and his team traveled around the world to the 5 blue zones, which are Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. And they studied these places and they identified 9 commonalities, which are called the Power 9. And these are all different lifestyle or environmental behavioral things that contribute to longevity. Things like moving naturally throughout your day, eating a healthy diet, not eating too much, spending time connecting with friends and family. And so for February this month, we are doing a series of cooking demos focused on the eating wise, and we'll be covering recipes that are included in the Blue Zones cookbook, also available online. And so today we're covering Southwest Quinoa Salad, which includes ingredients that would be found in the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And this recipe is loosely based off of a recipe that would be used there. And so I think we should go ahead and get started.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
And you guys are getting the first version. We really didn't practice at all, so please forgive our stumblings, and hope it's exciting for you to watch.
Yes. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We have a team member in the back and she'll shout them out and we can answer them. So the first thing is...
Can you tell everyone to mute themselves?
Oh, yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, would you just mute yourself? And maybe Megan could go through and mute people too. Perfect. So the first thing is the quinoa. And quinoa is a really nutritious grain. As a vegetarian, I eat a lot of quinoa. And so I pre-cooked this because we wanted it to be cool for the recipe. And you'll notice the recipe says 2 cups, but I like to double my recipes. I mean, our time is valuable, right? And so if you're cooking, might as well cook twice as much and then you have it the next day.
That's a great idea. That's what I like to do too. Yeah, perfect. Quinoa is also a really easy thing to add to salads, add to soups, to thicken it, to have as a side dish, and to replace rice anywhere that you would have rice. And Emily, did you actually know that quinoa is a seed? It's an ancient seed,
not a grain,
that we eat as a grain. And so that might add to some unique benefits that it has. It has high protein, has about 8 grams of protein per cup, good fiber. It's actually a low glycemic food. So it has some benefits for your blood sugar compared to rice. It's pretty low glycemic. And it is a complete protein. So it has all 9 essential amino acids that we need from our diet to perform all the functions that we need proteins for in our body.
Thanks, Laura. Mm-hmm. And one tip that I want to share for cooking any grain or seed is that to add a little bit of extra flavor, I like to cook it with either stock or with Better Than Bouillon. And so the one that I use today is this mushroom-based Better Than Bouillon. It is not a low sodium ingredient though. So, another option is to use a low sodium vegetable stock or something like that. So we've got that in here. Laura, do you have any cooking tips for quinoa?
If you know how to make rice, you know how to make quinoa. You basically cook 1 cup of quinoa with 2 cups of rice. You can just boil it. Once it comes to a boil, put it to a simmer, cover it. And the cooking time is generally 10 to 15 minutes. You can kind of visually check it. And if there's kind of a white spiral on the seed that detaches, and it will detach when it's cooked, you can also just check to make sure that the water is completely absorbed, just like you would with rice. And that generally indicates that it's cooked.
Sweet. So the last thing I did with the quinoa, because it was chilled, it was kind of lumped together into clumps. So I just went through with a spoon and kind of broke it up a little bit. So it's nice and loose, and it'll be easier to mix the other ingredients in.
Can I share one other tip about quinoa?
Yes, please.
Especially when it's cooled, an added health benefit for any grain or seed that's been cooked and cooled before you eat it is it becomes more of a resistant starch. And resistant starches are really good for our large intestines, specifically our beneficial gut bacteria. So it becomes indigestible by us, but it becomes food for our good bacteria. And that's really important for digestive health and also immune system health. And so I think that it's perfect that you let it cool. And even if you wanted to reheat it once it's cooled, you don't lose that benefit of it having more resistant starch. So that is a good tip for you all at home.
Thanks, Laura. I did not know that. And it sounds like, Megan, was there a question?
Yes, there is a question. We have so many people joining still. I'm so
Yay!
excited. So they asked in the chat if we share the measurements while you're long because we want what helpful.
Yes.
And told them that also the cook available at the wall.
Excellent. So the question, can we continue to share the measurements that we use as we go along? Because the 2-to-1 ratio for cooking quinoa that Laura shared was really helpful. And so I will do the best that I can. I am more of an intuitive cook rather than a by the numbers cook, which I think drives my husband crazy a little bit. But we've got a recipe here. We're going to follow it. And yes.
And that is the only cooked ingredient in this dish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be the most important thing to measure. Generally for grains, I'm calling quinoa a grain in this instance, but the serving size would be about 1/3 of a cup. And that's what the serving size would generally be.
Perfect. So next we've got our veggies that we're going to add. So we've got tomato, red onion. The recipe does not call for red onion, but I really like to add that flavor. So I've cut up some red onion. We have green onion that we'll add, limes for their juice for the salad dressing. We have bell peppers here, and then we've got cilantro. So one question that I had for Laura as we're cutting up our produce, you'll see I have a yellow bell pepper and a red bell pepper. The recipe called for red. The red one that they had at Andy's was pretty small, so I actually grabbed 2. And Laura and I were having a conversation before we started about why I like to use a lot of different colors of bell peppers. I mean, there's green, yellow, red, orange, purple, right? And I like to use a lot because I like how they look. But I also asked Laura to talk a little bit about the nutritional value of the different colors. Like, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in general, they're all nutritious. Bell peppers have a really good amount of vitamin C, more than 150% of our recommended daily amount. Some people need more than others, but they are high sources of vitamin C. And then getting more into the details, the health benefits of bell peppers do come with their color. There's different benefits to the phytonutrient that provides that color that would help our different body systems. And actually, the differences between red, yellow, orange, and green bell peppers is a matter of maturity. So the least ripe bell pepper is the green one, and the most nutrient dense and ripe bell pepper is the red one. So because it takes longer to grow and more labor, farming time to really tend to that red bell pepper, that contributes to the higher cost of the red bell pepper. But really, there's many benefits for all of them. Yes.
We have a question.
In the chat. What could they do to replace the tomato?
Oh, yeah. I have a friend who has some autoimmune issues. And so she actually follows an anti-inflammatory protocol diet. And she doesn't eat tomatoes, which are a nightshade. And so maybe that's something that people are thinking about. That's
Oh, and
the question was, what can we use instead of tomato if we can't eat tomato?
Well, if it's a concern of nightshade, actually, bell peppers are also a nightshade vegetable. So if it's just tomatoes though, that's a good question. I would add more bell pepper or maybe some cucumber or zucchini potentially. But if you're kind of trying to avoid bell pepper, all nightshades,
Cucumber sounds like a
that
good one.
Cucumbers.
Yeah. And the other thing is, bell pepper was not actually, tomato was not actually in this recipe, in the recipe list. But I like to add it because I like the flavor. I like how juicy it is. And I like the additional color. So as we're going through, I'm just cutting up the bell pepper here. Bell peppers can be a little bit tricky to cut up because there's the stem, you kind of have to cut around the stem, and then you have this white, like pithy, foamy part on the inside, and the seeds. So kind of cutting around those. If you're cutting jalapenos, you want to make sure, if you don't want it to be super spicy, you want to not include the seeds. But with bell peppers, I don't really mind having the seeds in there. It kind of just adds a little bit of extra texture, I think. So cutting up the bell pepper, and Laura is cutting up the cilantro. So one question I have for Laura about cilantro. I love cilantro. My brother hates it. Which of us is right? Probably me, right? Which of us is right? And why do people feel so strongly about cilantro?
Emily, I don't think you're going to like the answer to that question, which is that I think you're both right. And the reason is there's some genetic differences in taste buds. And people who don't like cilantro might be called what we call a super taster, meaning that there's more receptors and on their taste buds that are more sensitive to certain tastes, and cilantro is one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually 25% of people are super tasters.
Huh. I think my brother would love to hear that he is a super taster.
Yeah.
He does have pretty good taste.
One risk of being a super taster is that people tend to have more salt in their diet. People who are sensitive to bitter eat more salt, and that is generally something that we don't want to do in excess.
Too much salt is not a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about why?
Well, excess salt has been linked to be a risk factor for hypertension, which can increase your chances of developing cardiovascular disease. Our standard American diet is pretty high in sodium, and actually the highest sources of sodium come from foods that are commercially prepared. Not so much from the kitchen, but in general, lower sodium diets have some benefit. Also, if you have too much sodium in your diet, it can kind of cause some fluid retention, some pressure on your kidneys, and generally affect your blood vessels.
Thank you.
And fluid balance.
All right. So we've got our vegetables cut up. I'm going to toss them in.
That's so pretty.
Yeah, it was like a rainbow. So I added 2 Roma tomatoes, 1 very small red bell pepper, and 1 yellow bell pepper. I added maybe 5 or 6 green onions. I like the extra flavor that they add. And I'm not going to add this whole red onion. I think that could be a little overpowering. So I'm going to do maybe about half a cup and mix that in, just get a little bit of that nice purple color in there.
You really are getting the rainbow.
I am aiming for the rainbow. All right, so I'm going to mix this in super quick. And then the next ingredient that we want to add is beans. So we have black beans, and then I have a can of corn here. And this recipe calls for black beans. I personally think you could probably substitute in pretty much any bean that you wanted. And I chose to go with canned beans because they're a little quicker, but you can also use dried beans. They are a little bit more challenging to use because you have to plan ahead so you can soak them. But it's dried beans are a lot cheaper too. So when you have time, definitely use the dried beans. So I already opened it, but I'm actually going to drain and rinse. My mom always told me, don't forget to rinse it off. So while I'm doing that, I asked Laura to talk a little bit about why we would want to drain and rinse our canned foods.
Well, to drain and rinse just basically means you're washing off all the preservatives and you get to control more of the spices and seasoning that goes in your dish.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the back, I mean, both of these have added salt. And it's not that we don't want to eat salt, but like Laura said, we just want to be able to control the amount of salt that we're adding to our diet. So one other thing I wanted to talk about is that beans are literally the magical food. People in the blue zones eat a lot of beans. Laura, can you talk about why beans are so nutritious and how they can help us live longer?
Yeah. Well, beans are naturally very low in saturated fat. They have a good amount of protein. They're high in fiber. And these things can add to improved digestive health, improved heart health, can help with cholesterol, all kinds of things, really. Beans are very shelf stable. They can last for 3 years dried. And so they're inexpensive, they're filling. Foods that kind of fill us up can, just help us maintain weight and without as much food. And yeah, I'm probably missing a lot, but
no,
in a
that's
nutshell,
perfect. That's perfect. And
also,
go ahead.
One more plug for the good gut bacteria, which we have a very important relationship with. Also, beans are a prebiotic food, meaning they do feed our good gut bacteria.
Excellent. And we did a cooking demo previously on how to cook beans in a way that doesn't give you gas. And so if you're interested in learning more about cooking beans from scratch, from dry, you can find that video on our website. So now that we've got our canned items added, I'm just juicing 2 limes. I love lime juice. It's so fresh, has a lot of vitamin C in it. So I'm adding extra. So I juice them, I cut them in half, and then I use the citrus juicer. And then I'm also going to add some olive oil to it. Now, the recipe calls for maple syrup or agave. I don't really like to add that sweet flavor to my salad, so I'm actually substituting in olive oil. And, I think a lot of people are worried about too much fat. And fat is not all the same, right? So we hear a lot about fat-free and low-fat, but I like adding olive oil. And I wonder, Laura, could you talk a little bit about why we would want to add olive oil and why healthy fats can actually be good for us?
Yeah, so olive oil is definitely a heart healthy fat. And it provides about 70% as a monounsaturated fat from oleic acid. And that has many antioxidant properties, can help, maintain our blood vessels and prevent our bad cholesterol from oxidizing. I'll stop.
As you can tell, there are so many reasons to eat healthy fats. And we have a couple others in our toppings. We have the avocado, and then we have the hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds that we can add on. So next to the dressing, I'm going to add the spices. So the recipe calls for cumin, it calls for allspice, and then it calls for salt. So I've got a half a teaspoon of cumin. I'm going to add double that because I doubled the recipe. A little bit less of the allspice. I think this one's just going to be about 1/2 total. And then I'm also going to add a pinch of chili flakes. Now, this is not in the recipe, but I love adding just a little bit of spice. And my favorite chili flakes are ones that are made by a local farm, Hayshaker. They make their own dried chili flakes, and you can buy them online at their food hub, which is where I get mine. These ones I just bought in bulk at Andy's as well, and they're delicious and fresh. So we've got that ready to go. I'm going to dump it over the top here. The last thing we're going to do then is add the cilantro, which Laura has been cutting up, and then we're going to mix it all together. Laura, excellent. Now Do you want to mix up the salad or cut the avocado?
I'll mix.
Okay. So we are nearly ready. I'm going to go ahead and cut up the avocado. And the last thing that we're going to do after we mix it up is we're actually going to taste it. And so it calls for a certain amount of salt. I personally like to taste it before I add the salt because then I know how much salt I actually want to add. Okay, so
We have a question.
We have a question. What's the question?
How much olive oil to use?
I used about 3 tablespoons, but it's up to you. You know, it adds a lot of moisture to the salad. So because I'm using tomatoes, maybe I would need to use a little bit less olive oil. If you're not using tomatoes, you might want to add a little bit of extra olive oil. This looks beautiful. Yes. All right. So we've got our avocado cut. Avocados are a really delicious, nutritious source of healthy fats, as Laura pointed out. Yeah. We're going to add ours to the top. The other options that we have to add to the top are the salsa. According to Cole, our videographer, this is the best salsa. This is from Andy's. It is a hatch salsa. Got all the ingredients there. And rather than mixing that directly in like it calls for in the recipe, I'm actually just going to have that kind of be as something that can be added to the top afterward. And that way everybody can just choose to add however much they would like. And then the last toppings that we have are hemp seeds, which are another complete protein, right?
I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's something that I have heard. Megan has given me the thumbs up. And then pumpkin seeds. And these are both great ways to add a little bit of extra fiber, a little bit of extra protein, and some healthy fat to any dish.
Crunch.
And some crunch. Mm. Yes.
Texture.
Could you say the spices you used?
Yeah. So I used cumin, allspice, and then some red chili flakes. I used about twice as much cumin as I did allspice. A lot of Southwest or Mexican, Central American dishes have cumin in them. And so because this is the Southwest salad, we wanted to add that. So geez, this looks amazing. I think we're about ready to eat. Are there any other questions before we dig in? Excellent. Well, I'm going to grab some plates. So one of the suggestions for living the Blue Zones lifestyle and eating wisely is to actually use smaller plates. One of the Power 9 is the 80% rule. And that means, eating as much as you need to eat to nourish your body, but stopping before you're overstuffed. So eating 80%. And in Okinawa, Japan, they have a saying, hara hachi bu, which actually means to remind them to not eat until they're overstuffed. And so one of the tricks that they suggest is using smaller plates because the food will fill up more of the plate and you'll be less tempted to just pile it on. Mm-hmm. So Laura, this is not in the question preparation that I sent you. Danger zone. But based on your knowledge of the ingredients in here, what do you think would be a serving size?
Yeah, that's kind of hard to say because mixed with so many things. Obviously, a half a cup of this is going to be wouldn't necessarily be half a cup of quinoa. It would be much less than that. So I think that maybe a cup would be good, or maybe even yeah. Take it a cup at a time.
Oh, that looks so good. I love all the colors.
A general guide for measurement is if you want to eyeball it, not appropriate in every situation, but your fist, the front of your fist is typically a half of a cup, and the whole fist is typically similar to about a cup. So that can be like a good rule of thumb. Sometimes if you're buying things from bulk in the grocery store or trying to serve roughly equal amounts at a dinner.
I think that's really helpful because when you're buying things in bulk for a recipe, the recipe will call for 1 cup. But when you go to buy it in bulk, you just open the chute and it comes down into the bag. And it can be really hard to know how much you're buying. So I think that's really helpful. So there we go. I put some avocado on top. I'm going to do a sprinkle of those extra crunchy, delicious hemp seeds. And then I'm going to taste mine and then add salt if I want. And I think we're ready to eat. So I just want to thank everybody one more time for coming and spending your evening with us. We made the Southwest Quinoa Salad from the Blue Zones Kitchen Cookbook. It's available online. And Megan put the links in the chat. And special thanks to Laura Dean for sharing her knowledge with us.
Happy to be here.
She's like a really important part of the Blue Zones project team. We have amazing committees who are community members and advocates, and they help us guide our work. And it's really, really valuable. So before I let you go, I hope that you'll join us next week. Like I said, we're doing these every Wednesday in February. And next week, we will be joined by Rebecca, who is making some delicious baked goods, also from the Blue Zones Kitchen Cookbook. So thanks. I hope everybody has a great night. Let's eat.